It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them, so thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. My guest today is CEO James Nolan. James is an operating partner of Velocity Fund based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where he grew up, and he currently serves as CEO for InClinica. He started his pharmaceutical career at Dow Pharmaceuticals, a division of Dow Chemical, and he did his undergraduate work at Villanova University and completed the executive program in marketing management at the University of Michigan. James Nolan, welcome into the corner office.
It's a pleasure being here, Brant.
It's great to have you here. And we kind of like to get things started where we talk a little bit about those early years, and maybe we can, hear a little bit about where you grew up and, what your early family life was like.
I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on the mountain that overlooks the city. It's the one that has the inclines that go up. In fact, my family has been here from the founding of Mount Washington. And when I grew up in a 9-block radius, there were over 300 families that were cousins. So I had quite an active and incredible family experience. I probably had an ideal childhood.
How many generations does that go back in Pittsburgh, James?
8 or 9, I think. I mean,
that's fabulous.
My great-great-grandmothers we were actually, the Murphy side of the family were in the Revolution.
Terrific. And what was the original attraction in settling into Pittsburgh? Like so many families, is that kind of where their families were when they came in, or was it an attraction, from an economic standpoint? Pittsburgh known for its mining, of course, in years past.
I think the Nolan side, at least, came here for the economic reality. Pittsburgh was the gateway to the West and was certainly the industrial center of the country at the time. And if you needed a job, that's where you went. And we had family that were in the Civil War. I mean, we were kind of long-standing. So I think the economic realities of the time are why we were here.
Tell me a little bit about your parents and brothers and sisters, and what kind of influence they had on you growing up.
I was really fortunate. I would say I had an ideal mom and dad. My father is an ex-Iwo Jima Marine, and was he was a heavy equipment operator with the operating engineers, and was very, very active in the unions. My family has always been involved in labor. In fact, if you look at the original Teamsters Charter, you'll see my great-great-grandfather signed it like John Hancock did the Constitution. So I came from a very blue-collar background, a very, very hardworking people. They were everything from my father really worked for the city of Pittsburgh as the operating engineers and ran that section for the city for a long while, and then went back into the mills to help me get through college.
Awesome. Mom stay at home?
Mom was a stay-at-home mom, but before that, she had been a librarian for U.S. Steel. She had a photographic memory and an Irish temper, so she was the ideal mom.
I love that. Brothers and sisters?
I had one brother, my brother Jeff, who was a comedian. He was Father Malarkey on the radio, and he was a very active guy. He died about 15 years ago, unfortunately. And I have a sister, Jill, who's my baby sister, about 9 years younger than me. She works for the city of Pittsburgh right now for city council.
What were some of the early lessons that either mom or dad, kind of taught you at an early age that perhaps if you look back, set you on the course to your success in a career?
My mom and dad were very much follow your dreams. Um, they never held me back. They encouraged education. They encouraged my involvement in activities. And I think the most important thing is I had a huge variety of aunts and uncles, and they really encouraged involvement with them. And because of that, I really learned at a young age how to be part of a group and how to maneuver with adults with various backgrounds. I mean, it was amazing that, our kitchen table on a Sunday, he would be around, dude, everyone from the chief of police to a garbage man. And so
And they were all
and
family for the
they
most
were
part.
family or friends, and there were always people, and dinner conversation was always encouraged on a variety of different subjects. So from politics to what the economy was like to just day to day mundane issues. It was a wonderful way to grow up.
Pretty cool. Yeah. 300 families. I mean,
Oh yeah, you couldn't get
that's
away with
quite an
anything
influence.
here.
That's right. Everybody knew who James was, right?
Yeah,
Or were you Jimmy growing
I
up?
was known as Jimmy Mike, and they still call me it here. I moved back to Mount Washington about 5 years ago, and it's been interesting. Not much has changed, and then a lot has changed. It's very different.
Tell me about your school life. Were you a good student in school?
Yeah, I was more the nerdy type. I was very interested in history and English and reading, and I enjoyed it very much. I went to a very small parochial school. In fact, my graduating class was 53 people. The interesting thing
Wow.
about that is that meant you had to be in everything. From you were
That's
you were
right.
in the band, you were going to be in the choir, you were going to be in the play, you were going to play basketball and football. And basketball, I played in the local football league here. I mean, they needed bodies, so you were going to be in it. And the good part of that was you got to experience so much, and you got to appreciate all the different things. I remember the nuns even made us do ballroom dancing, and then had us take a year of square dancing. It was really different.
And if you're the odd man out and there were more boys in the class, you had to dance with the other boy,
Well, we
right?
were lucky there were more girls than guys, so we were kind of
So it was a
lucky.
girls' dance with the
Yes.
girls. I love it. Jesuit school?
No, actually, it was a parish school, so we had the Immaculate Heart nuns from Scranton.
So you mentioned sports. What other kinds of outside activities? Any music, theater, things that you did extracurricularly beyond them?
I was very, very active in forensics and debate, and competed on a national scale, and my community was incredibly supportive. I mean,
Was that all the way through high school or also college?
that was all the way through high school. It was a phenomenal experience that was afforded to me, and I think it set the stage for my university years and the rest. It was because of it I got a broad reach into meeting an awful lot of people, and to be perfectly honest, learned the value of having a good arts education. I think a person needs to be well rounded.
Well, it teaches you how to argue, right? And as well as to think. I got involved in debate in college, and I wished I'd done it earlier. I encouraged my kids to growing up, and my son would say, "Yeah, but Dad, I've got to take different positions." And well, that's good. You have to understand both sides because you're not always going to be right.
Right, and it was interesting to have to argue both sides because you really got to understand the viewpoint, and in these political times, it's really helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Excellent. What about outside of class with regards to entrepreneurial things? Did you have the ubiquitous paper route?
Well, in those times they had junior achievement, and I remember I was president of my companies. In the 3 years that I was there and then my last year, I guess my senior year, I was the president of the Presidents Association, which was all the presidents of the companies. They combined it, and I remember having to organize the socials and activities and all of that. And I was very happy because my business, 2 of those 3 years, won the top award for the gross sales and achievement. So it was a very good experience, and I don't even know if it's been a long time since I've been around junior achievement. I don't know if they're still active or not, but it was very
I see that on resumes a
it
lot.
was very helpful.
Did you actually, I mean, was there money that you were able to put in your pocket through that business?
Yeah, but I mean, we were I remember the one year we made coat hangers, really thick coat hangers. Our sponsoring company was U.S. Steel, so we were going to make something out of steel. So
Makes the
and
most
so it
sense.
was it was a lot of fun. I also, I had done everything from scouting, was an altar boy for the diocese. I had, the United Nations. I mean, you name it, I was involved in it, and so my high school was very fulfilling. I also had three jobs, and I was I worked in a grocery store. I cut the grass for my parish, my church, and believe it or not, I worked at Snuffy's Exxon and pumped gas and
Pumping gas,
changed
right?
tires, and then and then on holidays I would deliver for the local florist called Wallace Florist. And a really funny thing happened to me. In fact, this year I went in there and Mrs. Wallace was there, and I walked in, and of course it's been a long time, and she's up there now, and she looked at me and said, "Hey, you know, uh, Mother's Day's coming up. Are you going to be free? We're going to need help delivering." And I thought, well, it never changes.
That is awesome. Yeah, she looked at you at that 12, 13-year-old you were back
Yes.
then. Oh, that's cool. And was the money kind of used for savings? Were you encouraged to, this is set aside for college or, fun money, so to speak?
My children couldn't believe when I would tell them that every dime I made, I handed the check to my mother, and it was just the rule of the house. Mom handled the money, and my mom and my aunts. I had an aunt that lived with us, and then I had an aunt who had no children who had raised my father. They made sure I lacked for nothing. If I needed a buck, it was there. But I worked very hard, and we kept track of it, and it was the way it worked.
And it went into the communal pot. Yeah, very interesting. Cool. And was college kind of a foregone conclusion? It sounds like Dad, as an engineer.
Oh, there was no question that I was going to college. I think they would have tortured me if I didn't go to college. It was, and in my family, I was the only one. And so
Brother and sister did not. Yeah.
I had I had an uncle who was pretty successful, who had made a deal that with my family that if I went to Duquesne University where he had went, and I would walk to school every day like he did, he would pay the tuition, but it had to be under that. And my parents wanted me to get out, go somewhere, learn new things. But that was an offer you couldn't pass up, and the rest of it.
Full ride scholarship.
And
You can't.
and we had a pastor in our church who was called Monsignor Nor, who my family called the commander, who was bigger than life. He was kind of my mentor and really helped me throughout my life. And I'll never forget, it was the end of May. I'm thinking I'm going to Duquesne, and he walked in and he said, "Congratulations, you've been accepted at Villanova." And I didn't apply. And he said, "I did for you." And to a Catholic family in Pittsburgh, Villanova is the Harvard of the parochial schools, the Catholic schools. And it was like, he just sat there and said, "We're going to have a plan." That's where he's going. And to me, it just opened a world for me. I mean, Villanova was a phenomenal institution. And not only does it play basketball, but I got it, for basketball, but it was a very, very solid place. And the friendships I made there are still as strong now as they were when I was in college.
So you went there all 4 years.
Hmm.
Oh, fantastic.
I would advise anyone or young entrepreneurs that those friendships that you make early on are the ones you carry for your career. And to me, the most valuable lesson that I've learned in life is, I often talk about my best friends, and I have a number of them who when there's trouble, circle the wagons, and to me that's a key component.
No, that's so true. And again, a very common thread that we've seen through a lot of these CEO interviews. Those lifetime friends. So working during college. I mean, with the scholarship, quote unquote, that you received, is you still?
My father, because of my family's, were very active in the Democratic Party and the like, were able to help me get some really interesting summer jobs. I think there was one I did for 2 years that I was probably laid the framework for any understanding I had about leadership. I actually worked on a road crew and shoveled asphalt off the back of a truck. And there was a guy called the foreman. His name was John Lynch. To this day, the most incredible leader I've ever met. This was a simple group that there were guys who worked the dump truck. There were those of us who shoveled. There were the rakers, and there was the heavy equipment operator that was on the roller. There were 11 of us in the crew, and we would have gone to hell and back for him. It was
He was the crew
amazing.
boss.
He was
the crew
he,
ultimate crew boss.
well, he was there for you. He taught you lessons in a simple job. It really was it really taught me a lot about leadership. I mean,
well, it's backbreaking work too, James. I mean,
it was.
Gotta been a tough summer.
It was.
And
It
so
was
what
really
were some
hot,
of the things?
but it was really strange. You were repairing potholes, and every time you did a good one, you were looking up to have John give you that thumbs up. Look, good job on that one. He was just that kind of guy. And then I also worked for the county in the parks. I was a carpenter's laborer, and then I think my final year, which was the funny one, I was a road inspector for the state. Again, working with asphalt and that, making sure that the proper chemical makeup was there and things were done. So,
well, you had some previous experience after filling all those potholes,
you got it.
right?
So it really was helpful.
How did you kind of make the decision about what you did? How did you pick a major, I guess, in college? And what did you study?
I will never forget. I mean, this is a true story. My first class, I had, for some reason, Monsignor had suggested and others that I study economics. And remember, I went to this small parochial school, and I sat in on the first class. I'll never forget, Brant. And the subject was complex matrices of linear triangles. I started to laugh. I have never forgotten this topic my whole life. I just walked out and I laughed, and I thought, "Oh my God!" And I ended up. What had happened was I was brought in on a partial scholarship to be on the debate team, which was really the thing that made the difference. And I switched to political science, and
no big surprise.
Yeah, and I have to say that I had such a wonderful time learning things that I wanted to learn, and luckily for me, the political science department there was very focused on the human aspects of politics as opposed to the metrics, and I think it was very helpful to me. It also that education taught me an awful lot about writing. I think that skill, the writing skill, is so critical. Yeah, and I think very few people learn how to think when they write.
What was the first job you took out of college, James?
I actually was in your business. My first job was as a headhunter for an executive search for a company called Specialty Consultants in Pittsburgh. And they specialized in the real estate and construction and the shopping center industry. And the shopping centers were then booming. And I would have to tell anyone that the years that I spent there was probably the best selling experience you could ever have.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you know, you not only have to sell the person to the company, but the company to the person, and then you got to get your check. And it really was a phenomenal experience to be in my 20s, trying to place people in their 40s, 50s, 30s, etc. And it really taught me a lot about communication. It taught me a lot about how important honesty is in selling, which I think can be a lost art. And it really set the groundwork for me to understand how to do creative deals, because that's a business where creative deals are important.
You've summed it up pretty good, James.
Yeah. And then
what attracted you to that? Was it part of the Nolan family, or
it was an uncle who knew the guy who owned the company, and they were looking for recruiters. and quite frankly, there was a recession going on at the time, and try having a political science degree with a recession. And I did really well, actually. I got very lucky because I centered on something called the people that lease the space in shopping malls. And there was a guy who, I can't even remember his name. I think his last name was Kaplan, and he had a thing called the Retail Vacancy Reporter. And I got him to allow me to do a column, and it went to all the leasing people. And I got really well known because I put comedy in it. Because I was in the radio in college and did comedy and
Father Malarkey.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's in my family. And so it enabled me to get the kind of contacts. But I knew I wanted to do something else. And believe it or not, Brant, it was my church bingo. I happened to be, I was one of the volunteers that would work this because of the church I was in, and there was a man there. His name was Al Liska, and he was a division head for Dow Chemical. And he came to me and he said, "Hey, you're in the employment business. We're really gearing up and looking for something different in the pharmaceutical side of Dow. Would you help us recruit? Because all the employment agencies in Pittsburgh were basically going out of business because of the recession." And I looked at him, and on the way home, I kept thinking, and I'll never forget, there was a woman called Mrs. Grush. She had twins that were friends of mine. She was the librarian in Mount Washington, here where I grew up. And I went to her, and she ordered books from the main library, and we read about Dow Chemical, and I studied it. And I called Al Liska. I looked at the pharmaceutical industry. I called Al Liska, and I said, I have a candidate for you. Let me tell you about him. And when I was done, Al Liska said, "This guy sounds great. When can I talk to him?" And I said, "You've been talking to him for the
You
last 20
are.
minutes." And that's how
That's
I
great.
got into Merrill Dow Pharmaceuticals, which was a division of Dow.
Did you get some leadership responsibilities early on then? And
Al was a phenomenal mentor and a wonderful, wonderful man. And the selling skills I had gotten in the other business, but understanding the discipline of a national company and a discipline that it takes in pharmaceuticals, Al was phenomenal for that. And then I was very lucky. A number of just having the right mentors at the right time. I became a product manager for Dow, which was at the right place at the right time in the right way. And
still in your 20s, I would
yes,
imagine
I
at that
was.
time.
And it just all took off. And I ended up um, not only in major project management roles, but I had a lot of assignments because the senior executives of the company found that I was a good guy to be number two when they needed it to do things. So, I was on the Japan team. We went to Japan. I spent time in Europe, and then the thing I really became a conduit between R&D and the business. And I worked for a guy called Jerry Bell, who was one of the leaders in our industry, and he was an incredible mentor. He and Jim Moore were just phenomenal to me and really taught me a lot. And I went up through the ranks of Dow, and I was at the right company at the right time in the right way. You could use creativity. It was a time when the regulations were not. There was a dignity to the business that back in those days that were really great. It was a great time to really learn it. But the good thing was I first had to prove myself at the selling level. I mean, so it wasn't just, I wasn't one of those, you're going to spend 6 months in the field. I spent time in the field, proved myself, won the awards, and that got me in that really got me the opportunity.
Awesome. How many years were you at Dow, Jim?
I'm at 6, I think, around 6 or 7, I guess, somewhere around there.
And do you remember the first time you started managing people? I assume it was probably there, right?
Yeah, it was there. I was a division manager at one point in Detroit, Michigan, believe it or not. And it was a very diverse group. And it was a good group of people in a good way. And then during that period, because it was one of those things I had to have that box checked. And then I got recruited away to a company called Anaquest.
Mm-hmm,
And in that position, I was in charge of all the marketing of North America. And it was part of British Oxygen. Everyone's allowed a career mistake. That was mine. Um, it was it really taught me a lot about hospitals and hospital selling and the OR and of course anesthesia and the rest. But it also taught me what really poor bad management is. I mean, it really was not at my time there a well-run organization at all.
What's one of the worst lessons you learned? Right? Sometimes we observe some of those things in our career, and they can be some of the most.
What I learned is you don't make a move for money.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I should have learned that a long time before, but that's one part. But the second part is if you're not 100% confident in the person you're reporting to, and you believe that you know more than he does, and you really understand that, so you're not going to learn from him, don't take the job.
What about management experiences? Some of the lessons from those, and particularly managing and developing people. What are some of the things that you recall from those early years?
I think the first thing is there's a real fine line between friendship and leadership, but there has to be friendship. There has to be a trust level. And it's really important that your people trust you for your honesty. And that's difficult because, Dow and most companies have some form of rating and ranking. And people had to learn to trust me. And I had to learn to trust my people. And that's a hard lesson to learn. I mean, you can't just take an employee for face value. You have to really get to know them and really believe whether they're doing the job or not. And you also have a responsibility to train people. Even someone that you think is experienced can still learn new things if you're creative. And I think that those are the lessons that I learned. I also learned that there's a certain discipline. I never asked people to do something that I wouldn't do myself. And the other thing that I learned in a very strange way is, I'll give you an example. If we had a banquet and we had people at a small banquet, I would wait till everyone got their food before I get in that line. Simple little things people notice and make a difference. And the other thing I learned at Dow, we had the VP of marketing and sales. His name was John, and one of the things that I had to do, I was kind of a scribe for him for a thing, because there was a morale problem at a point. And what he did is he met with every single employee of the headquarters, 10 to 15 people at a time. And he said, I'm here to ask you, what can I do to help you do your job? But don't talk to me about compensation or insurance. Talk to me about other stuff. And
right.
It was the
things I can influence.
It was the most valuable lesson, because what I learned is if you take care of the little things, the big things take care of themselves.
We mentioned in your bio, you're running a fund and CEO of InClinica. Has this been your first CEO position, or was there something previous to that? Tell us a little bit about that.
I, for almost 20 years, was the CEO and president of the Institutes of Pharmaceutical Discovery, which was a major private biopharmaceutical company with 4 divisions. We serviced the pharmaceutical industry. We worked only on a contractual basis. We were a private company. We never sold stock. We started the company, and I think it was pretty significant. We started the company with $40 million from 2 pharmaceutical companies, and neither of them took a share of stock.
So you were a founder. You were a founder of that operation.
I was a founder and the CEO. I had been with Wyeth for a number of years in the international and R&D capacity. And at Wyeth, I did, my real job at Dow that I really enjoyed and discovered I had sort of a knack for it is the business of science. And I got a pretty good understanding of what it took to pick and put good, solid products on the market. And at Wyeth, that just took off. And then I got this opportunity. I was asked by these 2 CEOs from these 2 companies what I consider they wanted. One was French and one was Japan, and they wanted to put an organization together to really bring them the creativity from the United States. So I took part of my team from Wyeth that I was very tight and had built, and I made them an offer that I thought only I didn't think in a million years anyone would take it, and they took it. And so we were able to start that company. We based it in Connecticut because one of my partners in it, I had the majority, was a very experienced financial executive, and he lived in Connecticut, and I lived in suburban Philadelphia. He was on the shore, so guess who was moving? And we.
Well, now that explains the 203 area code. I was wondering about that.
Our laboratories were in Branford, but I lived in Guilford, and we really were the state of the art. I mean, we worked for numerous companies during our time period there. We had the Institute of IDD, the Institute of Drug Discovery. We had a spin-off of that called the Institute of Diabetes Discovery. We had the largest diabetes lab in the country at the time. We started, I think, very early on. It was one of those kind of things we didn't plan, but the Institute of Bioanalytics, where we did assay development for, you name the company, we worked with them. And when they had problems in that area, we would troubleshoot and do the work. And then we did an Institute of Consumer Health, where we did, we kind of became, where we did rescue clinical trials, and that's how we got the CRO experience. We started helping people that had problems with their products and dealing with it. The CRO industry was just at its infancy, and you get companies that had difficulties, and we'd go in. And that's when a number of major family investment groups found us. So it started with an offshoot of the Annenberg family, and we did truck lugger products for them. The Greer's Dorns came in, and we did Carryflex and work for them. And then the Mars family found us, and we helped found Mars Symbioscience for the Mars family, which is an extraordinary company and wonderful people that really wanted to see and take a look at in their product line things that they could really work on that would be beneficial to humans and to companion animals. And that was a long-standing, incredible assignment with some wonderful people.
James, you've had a lot of experience building companies, this and obviously in your current role. To share with us your thoughts a little bit about building a company culture and the importance of that.
I think building a company culture is becoming a lost art. I think because it's got to start with people that, from the very beginning, we have a meeting once a year where the senior team look at every single employee and say who belongs on the bus and who belongs off the bus. And we have been very, very careful to make sure we're not looking for yes people, but we're making sure that there are people that can work with us, that are open, that'll work in teams. And we take a very, very strong look at that. One bad apple in an entrepreneurial environment can ruin everything. And especially when you're dealing with science, because you may have someone that everybody says, oh, there's no way we could do this without them. And what we found over the years is, yeah, you can. If they're not the right fit. They don't fit in, you've got to make the change. That's the hardest thing.
Does it start with, James, kind of you as a founder or CEO having a vision with regards to what those kind of key principles are that form the culture? Do you find that it's more adaptive as you bring in the key people? How do you kind of define company culture?
I would love to sit here and say that I define it, but the truth is it either comes into being or it doesn't. And it all depends upon the mix of the people that you put in your squad. And to me, you've got to make sure that the key players that you're using are the kind of people that really want the company to succeed and the venture to succeed. And yeah, everybody has their own individual gains and wants, but you've got to make sure they're not the kind of people that will put a knife in someone's back as they go to climb. And to me, that's the culture I try to set. I mean, we've got a common goal. Let's make it work.
That's a good segue into the next question, which is, James, what do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in?
Creativity and intelligence. And creativity to me is number one. I used to ask an interviewing question, do you have a sense of humor? Prove it.
Tell me a good joke.
Yeah, it was, and I would say not a joke. Tell me a story. At yourself. And because most of the creative people I know are the first ones that could tell stories about themselves.
Yeah.
I kind of look at the person, and I listen to their story. I mean, you really have to pay attention to their story. So when I would go to interview people in Europe, I would inevitably, we would meet in London, and I would say, why don't we have lunch with Oscar Wilde? And instead of taking him to a restaurant, I take him in the train station, and they have this sandwich shop called the Upper Crust, where they make sandwiches out of baguettes. And I grab a baguette and a soda and have them do the same. And we'd sit near Oscar Wilde's statue. It immediately would throw them off. And it was interesting to see how some people reacted to that and how other people reacted. And the people that took it in stride and smiled about it and were great, I found ended up being the better people in the long run. May sound like a little simple thing, but
They weren't ruffled by it or had other expectations.
You worry about the people that in a crisis get ruffled, get angry or frustrated. You want
Take
the
them out of
people
their
that'll say,
setting
let's
and
think our
will
way
they
through
panic?
this. I've always been lucky to have teams around me that during the bad times, they'd circle the wagon. And that's important.
Well, James Nolan, you've been very, very generous with your time. We're just coming up on our last question here. And this is something we ask all the CEOs, kind of at the end. And, again, remembering our middle market audience, folks that, are maybe a decade or two behind you in their career. And, what kind of career and life advice would you give to them to, perhaps if they've got their eyes set on their own corner office to become a CEO, or perhaps even an entrepreneur like yourself and founding their own company? What are the 2 or 3 things that you think are important when you look back at your career that you'd be a mentor on or advise someone that maybe has those same aspirations?
Probably 3 things. The first is start building your team the minute you decide that's what you want to be. I mean, my COO has been with me since 1989. I mean, start building your team. Realize the relationships of the people that you want with you. If you look at my organization, you'll see that the key people have been with me for a long time. I've been through things with them. I know them and I trust them. The second thing is be sure you vet the potential competition that you're going to have. So many people say this is a great idea. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs that I meet, because now we're dealing with venture capital and looking at this, who they've got great ideas, but they've never really looked at their competition, or the look they've been is not great. You really need to vet your competition. And the third thing that I would advise them is, enjoy it. If it's a job, you're not going to be able to be successful as an entrepreneur or court and office. It has to be something you love doing. I mean, I love going to work every day. I love what I do. And if you're not going to love it, if you're doing it because it's going to be a means to another end, I would say then you haven't found the right passion.
It's the journey, not the job.
Exactly.
James Nolan, thank you so much for your time. We've really enjoyed hearing your story today.
Really enjoyed it. And Brent, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.